නිවසේ මෙවැනි මතුපිට රැඳෙන විස බීජ 99.9%ක්ම විනාශ කරන විම් ක්ලීනර්ස්.
Tonight, the judgment. The UNHRC resolution led by the UK on Sri Lanka passed.
This resolution and this core group is not anti-Sri Lanka.
But with strong support for the island voiced by certain nations.
All parties should refrain from politicizing human rights issues.
Draft resolution also fails to acknowledge the long struggle of the Sri Lankan people and government against LTTE.
The rebuttal. The foreign minister deplores actions of resolution sponsors, saying the EU even withheld vaccines.
Depriving over 100 countries of vaccination by blocking even the flow of vaccination to those countries. Sad to say.
The road not taken. President Secretary Dr. P.P. Jayasundar insists that Sri Lanka will never default its debt repayments while responding to the detractors of China currency swap.
Yuan is a IMF basket currency now. You take yuan and sell it to dollars if you want. So what is the problem?
All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Tuesday, the 23rd of March, 2021.
ඇල්කොහොල් අඩංගු hand sanitizer භාවිත කරන්න. ලෙඩ රෝග ඇති කරන විෂ බීජවලට එරෙහිව සටන් කරන්න. හඳුන්වා දීමේ මිල රුපියල් 350යි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammik Ekanaika. Now, following the report published by the Office of the UN Human Rights Chief, the core group stated earlier in February that a resolution will be brought against Sri Lanka as means to address what the group called harmful legacies of war and build a sustainable peace in the country. As such, the draft resolution titled Promoting Reconciliation, Accountability and Human Rights in Sri Lanka was adopted today and 22 votes were cast in its favour. 11 countries, however, supported the island by voting against the resolution. But India, Sri Lanka's closest neighbour, was not among them.
The decisive day which Sri Lanka knew was coming finally arrived today. The draft resolution AHRC 46/L1 Rev 1 titled Promoting Reconciliation, Accountability and Human Rights in Sri Lanka was tabled at the United Nations Human Rights Council, which was subsequently voted on by its 47 member nations. Before the voting began, some member states voiced their stance with regard to the resolution.
This resolution responds to the High Commissioner's most recent report. It acknowledges progress where this has been made. It also reflects the High Commissioner's findings that the human rights situation has deteriorated, with particular concerns for human rights defenders in civil society space and members of different ethnic and religious communities. Madam President, this resolution and this core group is not anti-Sri Lanka. We are friends of Sri Lanka and its people. We bring this resolution in the hope that it will help advance the human rights of all communities, including Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, Sinhala, or Tamil. And most importantly, that it will help prevent the recurrence of past grave violations. We regret that agreement could not be reached with Sri Lanka during the 4 informal meetings on the draft resolution. Nonetheless, we believe this constructive and balanced text provides the best framework to support justice and lasting reconciliation and address the most critical human rights challenges. We call on all members of this Council to support this resolution.
This general comment has been agreed by the EU as a whole. The EU regrets that the government of Sri Lanka has withdrawn its support to these resolutions. It is key that the Human Rights Council signals the international community's continued support for post-conflict reconciliation and accountability in Sri Lanka. This resolution is also important given the warning signs of a deteriorating human rights situation, including erosion of democratic checks and balances, rise of exclusionary rhetoric, intensified surveillance and intimidation of CSOs, human rights defenders and victims, as well as discrimination of persons belonging to religious and ethnic minority communities.
In the meantime, a common argument leveled against the resolution by member states who were against the resolution on Sri Lanka was that the UNHRC undermines the sovereignty of other nations and that the Council is currently in violation of its own mandate.
Sri Lanka considers the draft resolution to be unwarranted, unjustified, and in violation of the relevant articles of the United Nations Charter It is based on the rejected report of the OHCHR on Sri Lanka, which was tabled at this session and which violates the principles of sovereign equality of all states and non-interference in internal affairs. The resolution is presented without the consent of Sri Lanka as the country concerned and is therefore unhelpful and divisive. No country has a greater interest in bringing about reconciliation among its peoples than the country concerned. Sri Lanka categorically rejects the unprecedented proposal in OP 6 of this resolution to expand the role of the OHCHR. This is a dangerous precedent and will have wide-ranging implications for all countries. All members of this council will agree that this body cannot assume tasks not assigned to it by the UN General Assembly in Resolution 60/251 or in subsequent resolutions. Against this background, I call upon all members of this council to objectively assess whether Sri Lanka represents a situation that warrants the financial and human resources and the urgent attention of this council in this exaggerated and polarized manner. Over $2.8 million is the estimated cost of this exercise, and over a dozen new staff members are to be recruited according to the PBI. Sri Lanka is of the view that this resolution will polarize Sri Lankan society and adversely affect economic development, peace and harmony. For all the above reasons, Sri Lanka rejects this draft resolution and requests the members of this council to reject this resolution by a vote.
All parties should promote and protect human rights through genuine dialogue and cooperation and refrain from double standards and politicizing human rights issues. We advocate that all countries should observe the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, respect the sovereignty and independence of other countries, and abandon the practice of interfering in other countries' internal affairs, undermining other countries' sovereignty and international cooperation under the pretext of human rights. The sponsors of Draft Resolution L1 Rev 1 disregards the efforts and achievements by the Sri Lanka government to promote and protect human rights, ignores the wishes of the Sri Lanka people, and interferes in Sri Lanka's internal affairs under the guise of human rights, and disrupts the excellent situation of Sri Lanka's development and stability. It's a typical example of politicizing human rights. The HRC should not facilitate this dangerous trend. To safeguard the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and the principles established in GA Resolution 60/251, China requests a vote on Draft Resolution L1 Rev 1 and will vote against it.
The Sri Lankan delegation made proposals to align the draft text with its national action plans on reconciliation and accountability, including through empowerment of Commission of Inquiry as well as offices on missing persons and reparations. We regret rejection of these proposals. During the course of informal consultations, Sri Lanka and a number of other delegations had explained that operative paras 5 and 6 of the draft text lacked balance, proportionality and inconsistency. For example, preambular paras 4 and 11 of the text reaffirm the sovereignty of Sri Lanka and welcome its continued engagement with the UN and its human rights mechanisms. However, these provisions are at complete variance with the legally untenable external accountability mechanism. We note that such provisions are neither grounded in nor are drawn from the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, the founding UNGA Resolution 60/251 and the IB package. Draft resolution also fails to acknowledge the long struggle of the Sri Lankan people and government against LTTE, an internationally recognized terrorist organization. The horrendous terrorist activities by this organization, aided, abetted and financed externally, had resulted in the loss of innocent lives and depriving the people of Sri Lanka from their basic rights and freedoms. The draft resolution fails to condemn these crimes unequivocally and shies away from a call for accountability of the LTTE and its sponsors and financiers. Unfortunately, the draft resolution appears to rekindle the sufferings rather than healing the wounds of the people of Sri Lanka.
Instead of trying to support the country's delegation and encourage it to engage in dialogue, the sponsors of the draft resolution have preferred to continue using a former practice of making allegations against it. This draft resolution does not reflect balance or objectivity.
Leading up to the vote, all eyes were on India to see which way it would vote. Both the government and Sri Lanka's detractors were pinning hopes on the superpower for different reasons. In its pre-vote address, the Indian delegate failed to show any backing to the island.
India's approach to the question of human rights in Sri Lanka is guided by two fundamental considerations. One is our support to the Tamils of Sri Lanka for equality, justice, dignity, and peace. The other is in ensuring the unity, stability, and territorial integrity of Sri Lanka. We have always believed that these two goals are mutually supportive, and Sri Lanka's progress is best assured by simultaneously addressing both objectives. India supports the call by the international community for the government of Sri Lanka to fulfill its commitments on the devolution of political authority, including through the early holding of elections for provincial councils, and to ensure that all provincial councils are able to operate effectively in accordance with the 13th Amendment to the Sri Lankan Constitution. At the same time, we believe that the work of OHCHR should be in conformity with the mandate given by the relevant resolutions of the UN General Assembly.
Following this, the vote got underway. 11 countries voted against the resolution, but 22 voted in favor. China, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Russia, Cuba, Bolivia, Venezuela, Eritrea, Philippines, Somalia, and Uzbekistan voted against the resolution. But Argentina, Armenia, Austria, Bahamas, Brazil, Bulgaria, Ivory Coast, Czech Republic, Denmark, Fiji, France, Germany, Italy, Malawi, Marshall Islands, Mexico, Netherlands, Poland, South Korea, Ukraine, UK, and Uruguay voted in favor of the resolution. 14 member nations meanwhile abstained from voting, with India being among them.
Now, Secretary to the President Dr. P.B. Jayasundara insists that the country's tax structure will not be revised as means to reduce the fiscal deficit. In order to encourage an efficient, transparent and compliance-friendly tax regime, he assured that no other taxes will be introduced during the next 5 years. He made these remarks delivering the keynote address at the inaugural ceremony of the Colombo Development Symposium, which saw the country's top corporate leaders, CEOs and policymakers in attendance. Dr. Jayasundara's address was followed by a panel discussion comprising private sector and public sector officials who further discussed Sri Lanka's march towards an upper middle income economy.
Colombo Development Symposium, organized by Biznomics, is a series of development forums to engage the foremost business leaders and policymakers in Sri Lanka in a constructive dialogue on the island's aspirational journey towards a poverty-free, advanced middle-income economy in Asia. Its inaugural event was worked off today with Secretary to the President Dr. P.B. Jayasundara making the keynote address under the theme "The Road Not Taken."
This country got used to bilateral, unsolicited, expensive debt. Some appear to be very attractive because the interest rate is 1%, 2%, 30-year repayment, etc. But they are extended by their own currencies, and the currency conversion makes those debt difficult, unmanageable. Most of the projects won't bring any results during our lifetime, and we have cancelled many of those projects, regardless of whether they come from China, India, or Western European countries or Eastern European countries, as President has announced in his policy framework. Budget deficit will be brought down, not simply by reimposing VAT. We are assuring the tax regime that we have instituted will not change. Next 5 years, VAT is 8%. Income tax is whatever rate we have gathered. No other taxes will be brought in. We need much more efficient, transparent, compliance-friendly tax regimes, and that is given.
Dr. Jayasundara also touched on the $1.5 billion currency swap between the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and the People's Bank of China.
People are asking, how do we finance debt? Debt financing, we have $4 to $4.5 billion debt servicing each year from last year till 2025. I honestly don't expect any debt default situation, because if debt default happens, I know what the consequences. During the tsunami, during the 30-year war, never defaulted, not just debt, we haven't defaulted even LC. That's the credit record we have maintained. 2020, despite the prediction, we honored all our debt, and 2021 also debt will be honored. Now, in support of this, we are also looking for non-conventional instruments. People's Bank of China has pledged $1.5 billion swap to give the backing. We don't want to use it, but we want to use as a standby. When that is available, some are predicting yuan is not a currency, it's not dollars, but yuan is a IMF basket currency now. You take yuan and sell it to dollars if you want. One of the largest payment is to China, so pay yuan. So what is the problem? And this issue is not being properly articulated and say yuan swap is no swap. If we swap with IMF, it's a swap. How?
During the panel discussion that followed, Sri Lanka's economic revival path and progress was discussed from the perspective of both the private and public sector.
We've seen many challenges from the Easter tax, COVID, but going forward, in order to take the road not taken, your policies, key focus areas, if you may elaborate on.
If you take the 2021 budget, it's all about inclusive growth. So for that, from the fiscal side, we have in one side the tax structure. I'm happy to say that we managed somehow to gazette the enabling legislations. And also, if you take the 2021 budget, we have a public investment of 1 trillion. It's more rural-centric, domestic, and also domestically funded. That doesn't mean that we are not getting foreign support, but again, World Bank, ADB funds, that will be less import content. So it will be stayed in Sri Lanka. On the investment side, the cabinet has entrusted us to fast track the investment. There are certain bottlenecks. Investors get frustrated. So our job is somehow to push these investments.
What challenges for the private sector going ahead?
The tourism side continues to be badly impacted, obviously, because of COVID. Some of the recent relaxations in the quarantine regulations will help to improve tourist arrivals, but it will take time. With the vaccines being rolled out worldwide, we expect that later in the year there should be a significant pickup. Consumer side recovered very quickly after the lockdowns were lifted in June. We are now seeing a business returning to normal since January. You can see the confidence in the Western province, where our footfalls have returned very close to what it was pre-COVID.
For Sri Lanka, what strategies do you have in order to make Sri Lanka more attractive as an investment destination?
Whether it is the law reforms, whether it is taking the tax payments online, whether it is putting our customs process through an online process, ease of doing business, debottlenecking these things will make it a more conducive environment to invest. As BOI, we need to be better at hunting. In terms of some of the changes we are trying to make, in terms of going out, attracting, and bringing the companies in. I think then if I look at the audience, I think there's a larger role that I would expect from the private sector. One of the things that I hear more frequently is that the larger companies say that I don't have a dancing partner in Sri Lanka. So that means they want large companies to be part of their development and growth opportunities or their investments in Sri Lanka. And I think in that dialogue, I think we should engage more and find good marriages.
When Sri Lanka looks at going global, creating global Sri Lankans, do we have that environment now from the private sector perspective?
We should get the private sector involved in our investment promotion. The world out there like to hear from the country people, but they like to hear from respected multinationals who have made success stories here. Tax concessions and all are good, but perception is paramount. I think our media and social media is letting us down. That's what the world sees. Take all the newspapers. Is there any positive story? No. So that is a big drawback for us.
There seems to be some challenges in managing rupee stability.
Not only rupee should be strengthened, we should be able to fix our foreign reserve management, and the exchange rate must come back to its right level. This artificial rate serves no purpose. Take, for example, total foreign debt that the Treasury Secretary has to honor, $57 billion. Every rupee depreciation is 57 billion rupees. So if we can get a much more decent, stable, stronger currency, he can give 57 billion to construction, that's free. He can give another 57 billion rupees to put the East Terminal. This is how this country should look at, and here the guys who have to get the exchange rate. If each guy bring $1 million, how many people here? 150. So 150 million bringing $1 million each means $150 billion. Exchange rate should be 175. Very simple.
Now, circling back to Geneva, after the UNHRC adopted the resolution on Sri Lanka, Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena said that the number of votes that the European nations expected against Sri Lanka did not materialize. Now, let's see what the minister's response was to the result in Geneva.
Our call, as well as today's call, was let us defeat COVID and give vaccination to over 100 countries that are today asking for the vaccination. And it's not a time to be bringing country-specific resolutions, selecting country A, B, and C. This was the voice. And we shall not also support countries who are in the process of progressing, building better lives to people who have been lost their lives by terrorism, progressing in economic and other sectors in those countries. Sri Lanka was appreciated by all these countries who expressed their viewpoint. His Excellency the President, with his mandate in 2019, soon after his election as President, decided, as promised to the country, to withdraw from the co-sponsorship of the resolution on Sri Lanka. But constitutionally, it was not possible. It's not only this government is saying this. Even my predecessor, Minister Marapana, mentioned this officially in international forum. Out of the 47 countries of the Human Rights Commission, they could harness only 22. 25 votes was not on their side of the resolution. They did not say yes to the resolution. This is the most important message that the countries in Geneva has given amidst great pressure by the European countries on them. We thank all those countries who stood up for the defense not only of Sri Lanka, for the defense of all other countries, sovereign nations of the world. Because today it could have been Sri Lanka, and tomorrow it could have been any other country. The global south has stood up and clearly expressed the view the government of Sri Lanka stated before the Commission. This was not the forecast of the European nations even about 1 hour ago. I must say, their figures have gone wrong. As they go wrong by depriving over 100 countries of vaccination, by blocking even the flow of vaccination to those countries. Sad to say, but we have to mention this. Any of these resolutions, without the consent and the acceptance of the country concerned, cannot be implemented. That is the basic principle. It will have to go a very, very long way. They have been calling for a report in the next 12 months, and that they would be reporting back. As we mentioned to the Human Rights Commission in Geneva, our commitments to the UN system will continue.
Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena also said that houses can be built in the Jaffna Peninsula, with the UNHRC have allocated to set up an office to investigate human rights violations in the country.
They're talking about 2.8 million, which is almost 400 million rupees. We could have given entire Jaffna Peninsula can be given housing that is necessary so that every citizen of Jaffna Peninsula would have got a house.
Now, Sri Lanka's vaccination drive continues with the daily caseloads also on the way. Here's the latest on Sri Lanka's pandemic situation.
5,983 PCR tests were conducted in Sri Lanka yesterday, during which 314 COVID-19 cases were confirmed. That includes 270 confirmed from 20 districts, with the remaining 40 being identified among foreign arrivals. This time the highest number of infections were reported from Trincomalee with 52, while the Gampaha district, which recorded triple digits for 2 consecutive days, only confirmed 29. In addition, 30 cases were identified from Kaluthara, 28 from Colombo, 27 from Kegol, 24 from Galle, 13 from Anuradhapura and 12 from Nuwara. Meanwhile, 12 other districts accounted for the remaining 59 infections. However, no cases were detected from Jaffna, Kilinochchi, Mena, Puttalam and Batticaloa districts yesterday. Meanwhile, the caseload for today presently stands at 142. In the meantime, 5 more coronavirus-related fatalities were reported yesterday. The deceased were residents of Gampaha, Galle, Kaluthara, Badulla and Kurunegala districts. On the vaccination front, 8,490 people were administered with the first dose of the Oxford-AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine yesterday. That meant the number of people being vaccinated at the end of yesterday being at 838,355. Meanwhile, the total number of COVID-19 recoveries in Sri Lanka increased to 87,306, with 248 more persons being confirmed to have completely recovered from the virus today. This brings the country's active number of COVID-19 cases to 2,799.
Now, reaffirming its unparalleled popularity and credibility, Derana Media Network clinched top awards at this year's Slim People's Awards worked off this evening. Among the many awards, TV Derana won the People's Youth Choice TV Channel of the Year, while FM Derana claimed the People's Youth Choice FM Channel of the Year. For its credible news broadcasting, AdaDerana bagged the award for People's News Provider of the Year as well. During the ceremony, our very own Chatur Alvis won the People's Television Presenter of the Year. Meanwhile, Devani Inima, which is a TV Derana telecast, won the award for People's Teledrama of the Year award, while Nayanthara Wickramaarachi, also of Devani Inima, won the People's Television Actress of the Year award. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.